1:15. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the news edited and read by Rumesh Piris. First, the headlines. The health authorities warn Omicron-fueled wave possible in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's coronavirus caseload is on the rise. The Registrar General's department says a security clearance is required when a Sri Lankan wishes to marry a foreigner. The SLBC to be empowered to test imported LP gas quality. The former President Maithripala Sirisena says Sri Lanka must seek the support of the International Monetary Fund. The SLBC says white-collar crimes must be brought to book immediately. The restrictions on mirrors of whale watching lifted. And in news overseas, the UN horrified by massacre of dozens of civilians in Myanmar. And in sports, it's cricket. England batters face tricky hour after Australia take 82-run lead. And now the news in detail. The health authorities have predicted that another wave, which would be triggered by the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 virus, could be witnessed in the country in the future. President of the Sri Lanka Family Physicians Association, Dr. Malkanthi Galhena, told a media briefing that it was of utmost importance that people brace themselves to face such a wave and to avert it. Dr. Galhena urged those eligible individuals who had not yet received their third shot to get themselves the booster vaccine as early as possible. Another 398 COVID-19 cases have been detected in Sri Lanka yesterday, raising the number of confirmed infections to 583,649. 396 cases have been linked to the New Year COVID-19 cluster, while 2 persons who arrived in the country from overseas in recent days also tested positive for the virus. Accordingly, the Epidemiology Unit of the Ministry of Health said 9,329 persons are currently receiving treatment for coronavirus at several facilities across the country. Earlier today, 308 persons who recovered from COVID-19 were discharged from hospitals, raising the number of recoveries in the country to 559,436. Sri Lanka's coronavirus death toll is currently at 14,884. The Sri Lankan government has decided to empower the Sri Lanka Standards Institute to inspect the quality of imported LP gas in the country. The Consumer Affairs Trade Minister, Lasantha Alagiyawanna, said that the respective gazette will be published soon, and the Controller General of the Department of Imports and Exports Control had transferred such powers to the Sri Lanka Standards Institute. Accordingly, when LP gas is imported to the country, a certification is required for the site where it was refined. The State Minister said in the future, an import quality assurance certificate will be required for the importation of LP gas. The former President Maithripala Sirisena says Sri Lanka must seek the support of the International Monetary Fund if it expects the current economic crisis to be resolved. Recalling his tenure as the President, the former President said he worked with the IMF throughout his term in office. He commented that conditions imposed by the IMF can be negotiated to be favorable to the country if they can be convinced. The leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, says he will punish all those responsible for the controversial gas leak explosions under a future Samagi Jana Balawege government. MP Premadasa, citing the report by the Presidential Commission, stressed that more than 300,000 cylinders are affected by the decision to change the composition of LP gas. He commented that those responsible for these white-collar crimes must be brought to book immediately. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The Tourism Minister Prasanna Ranatunga has instructed the authorities to take steps to lift the restrictions imposed by the Wildlife Department on the Mirisu whale-watching boat tour operators, ensuring that whale-watching tourists are not hindered while whales are not harmed. Media and social media reports have recently revealed that the Wildlife Department has recently imposed restrictions on whale-watching vessels off the coast of Mirissa. Accordingly, Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga had summoned the representatives of the Mirissa Tour Boat Owners Association to Colombo for a discussion, and also summoned the heads of the Wildlife Department. Improving the facilities of the Mirissa Fisheries Harbour for local tourists visiting Mirissa for whale watching were also discussed at length. The Fisheries Minister Douglas Devananda says that bank loan facilities have been made available for some of the beneficiaries to expand aquaculture and production. Fishermen, who are some of the beneficiaries, are eligible for these loan facilities. Loans up to 500,000 rupees can be obtained through the Samurdhi Bank. Minister Devananda further emphasized that the 250,000 rupees can also be obtained through the Regional Development Bank. A massive digitalization project to transform Sri Lankan television into the world's most advanced technology will be launched in Colombo tomorrow. There is an urgent need to launch the digital broadcasting project, a major revolution in the transformation of the current television broadcasting analog system in Sri Lanka through outdated technology into the world's most advanced technology. The Minister of Mass Media and Information, Dallas Alaha will be the chief guest at the launch of this digitalization project at 7 p.m. tomorrow at Taj Samudra Hotel in Colombo. The new project will be launched under special financial assistance provided by the government of Japan to Sri Lanka. Police have warned 1,749 people in the Western Province over failing to wear the face mask in a proper manner. The operation to impose health and safety guidelines in the Western Province was conducted yesterday with the participation of 737 police mobile patrol unit officers. Officers warned 3,012 motorcyclists, 2,439 three-wheeler drivers and 7,352 pedestrians. And that ends local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
The Registrar General's Department has issued a circular making security clearance report mandatory in the event of a marriage between a Sri Lankan citizen and a foreigner. The department said the circular has been issued following the instructions received from the Defence Ministry as a measure to ensure national security. As per the current marriage registration procedure, only 3 documents such as a valid passport, a certification of confirmation of civil status and the birth certificate are required to proceed with the marriage registration process. However, under the new process, original of the license issued by the Registrar General and a self-declaration of the health condition is required apart from the existing prerequisites. And that was the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
In Watchlight, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board says that an urgent water cut will be imposed for 12 hours with immediate effect in Colombo and suburbs. Accordingly, the water supply to Colombo, Sri Jayawardenapura Kotte, Kaduwela and Dehiwala Mount Lavinia Municipal Council areas, Maharagama, Boralasgamuwa and Kolonava Urban Council areas and Kotikawatta Mulleriyawa Pradeshiya Sabha areas will be interrupted. The NWS and DB said the sudden water cuts is due to an electricity failure at the Ampatale water treatment plant and will be restored at the earliest. And that came to you in Watchlight.
World News. Brought to you by courtesy of
Christmas and New Year sales with CIB Janajaya Vasana has commenced. Valuable prizes and vouchers for CIB bills during the entire month of December. 20% discount will be given for bank cards and for gift vouchers. Visit CIB today as well.
Moving on to a bulletin of world news, first the headlines. The UN horrified by massacres of dozens of civilians in Myanmar. Sudan security forces accused of violence against protesters. Heavy rain destroys dams in northeastern Brazil. And now the world news in detail. A high-ranking United Nations official said he is horrified by reports that at least 35 civilians have been killed and their bodies burned in eastern Myanmar, demanding the government launch a thorough and transparent investigation. 2 workers for non-profit group Save the Children remained missing after their vehicle was among several that were attacked and burned in this incident in Kaya State. The United States Embassy in Myanmar on Sunday said it was appalled by the barbaric attack in Kaya State that killed at least 35 civilians, including women and children. Sudan's security forces have been accused of using excessive violence during protests against military rule in the capital Khartoum. The pro-democracy demonstrations on Saturday saw thousands of protesters approach the presidential palace for the second time in a week, waving flags and chanting slogans against the military. They were met by heavy security presence and tear gas was used to disperse the crowds. A doctors' union allied to the protest movement said 178 demonstrators were injured on Saturday and has accused security forces of using live bullets. Thousands of residents have been forced to flee their homes in northeastern Brazil as weeks of heavy rain caused flooding. 2 dams in the state of Bahia collapsed on the weekend. Rivers are swelling, threatening further havoc. Drone footage showed submerged roads and bridges and people evacuating in boats. The governor of Bahia said thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate and about 400,000 people in total have been affected. Back to the headlines of the world news. The UN horrified by massacres of dozens of civilians in Myanmar. Sudan security forces accused of violence against protesters. Heavy rain destroys dams in northeastern Brazil. And that concludes the bulletin of world news.
World News. Brought to you by courtesy of
Christmas and New Year sales with CIB Janujaya Vasana has commenced. Valuable prizes and vouchers for CIB bills during the entire month of December. 20% discount will be given for bank cards and for gift vouchers. Visit CIB today as well.
Development News is brought to you by Let's take all out of the coconut tree and make the island thriving and prosperous. Call our hotline 1928. WhatsApp 070 400 1928.
According to Labour Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva, the government plans to take over the unutilized land plots of the regional plantation companies in 6 months by reenacting the Revival of Underperforming Enterprises and Underutilized Assets Act. Once the government takes over these land plots under the provisions of the proposed enactment of the Underutilized Assets Act, the Labour Minister said that these land plots will be distributed among the families of estate workers and farmer families, with a special focus on the youth for livestock projects. And that was Development News.
Development News was brought to you by the coconut tree is well grown in almost all the parts of the island. It is an exceptional source of extra income. The shell, the husk and almost all the parts of the coconut tree makes you money, providing you with an excellent extra source of income. It will also help to nourish the economy of the country. You will be guided with all necessary informations regarding the coconut cultivation, with the novel cultivation techniques and all other related and upgraded informations by the Coconut Research Institute, Lunavilla. Call our hotline 1928. WhatsApp 070 400 1928.
Moving on with sports news.
And in sports, it's cricket in the second day's play of the third Ashes encounter between Australia and England in Melbourne, Australia. Australia were dismissed for 267 runs, which gives them a lead of 82. In their first innings, England made 185 runs. In reply for Australia, Marcus Harris made 76, David Warner 38 runs. James Anderson took 4 wickets and Ollie Robinson and Mark Wood took 2 wickets each. Ben Stokes and Jack Leach shared a wicket apiece. Short while ago, England was 17 runs for 2 wickets, losing Zach Crawley and David Malan in their second innings. In other cricket news, day 1 at the Centurion, South Africa, where tourists India are playing against host South Africa. India chose to bat, and at stumps, India were 272 runs for the loss of 3 wickets, with KL Rahul and Ajinkya Rahane at the crease with 122 and 40 runs, respectively. And that's sports news.
For all foreign currencies remitted through NSB based on the US dollar value, 10 rupees more per dollar, plus more gifts until 31st December 2021. NSB, the safest place for your money.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
In business news, John Keel's Foundation conducted a 2-week public campaign against gender-based violence under its project WAVE, working against violence through education. This year's campaign sustained last year's theme of Break the Silence, with a special focus on domestic violence in the context of reported surge in complaints received on hotlines during the pandemic. The overall objective of the public campaign was to empower both victims and bystanders to break the silence on violence, increasing awareness, promote advocacy, and create a platform for discussing challenges and solutions on combating gender-based violence. And that's business news.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSB globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSB Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
The central bank last week decided to extend the worker remittance incentive scheme, which offers an additional 10 rupees for each dollar converted through January 2021 from an earlier end date set at December 31st, 2021. Among several measures taken during the last few months to encourage migrants to use official banking channels when repatriating their earnings to Sri Lanka, the central bank is offering an incentive of 10 rupees for foreign remittances sent via formal banking channels. In addition to the 10 rupees incentive, the central bank has also decided to bear the transaction cost incurred by the Sri Lankans working abroad up to a defined limit when remitting their money through exchange houses and or banks. And that ends economic news. The weather report is next.
The Weather Report.
And finally, moving on to the weather report, the Meteorological Department forecasts mainly fair weather to prevail over most parts of the island. Slightly cold weather in the night and early morning is expected over most part of the island. Misty conditions can be expected in the western, Sabaragamuwa, central, north central, southern and Uva provinces during the morning. And that was the weather report. And during this news broadcast, a recap of the main news headlines. The health authorities warn Omicron-fueled wave possible in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's coronavirus caseload tally is on the rise. The Registrar General's department says a security clearance is required when a Sri Lankan wishes to marry a foreigner. The SLBC to be empowered to test imported LP gas quality. The former president of Maitripala Sirisena says Sri Lanka must seek the support of the International Monetary Fund. The SJB says white-collar crimes must be brought to book immediately. The restrictions on merits of whale watching lifted. And in news overseas, the UN horrified by massacres of dozens of civilians in Myanmar. And in sports, it's cricket. England's batters face tricky hour after Australia take 82-run lead. And with that, we conclude this news broadcast from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.